Well, hello there. Welcome to the stream. I'm Father Roderick, streaming from, well, an old spaceship. Let me turn off the autofocus, which sometimes creates some problems. Hello if you're watching me on Facebook. Hello if you're watching me on YouTube. I am I'm going to record another episode of my podcast, my weekly podcast. And as long as the internet works, I will also stream that. Now, for those of you that are watching this after the fact and you notice that the stream is not an hour long or so, then probably the internet connection broke. That is one of the downsides of my current situation. The internet is okay. But at random moments, it just breaks. It breaks the connection, and then I am even unable to restart the stream. I have to do like a hard reset of the program, which is usually something I cannot really do when I'm in the middle of recording a show. So my apologies in advance if the stream breaks. But there is always the audio episode. And that is also true in case you're seeing this for the first time and you're like, what podcast? If you go to fatherroderick.com or you look for Father Roderick in your podcatcher software, you'll be able to listen to my show. I think my Siri is reacting to something. It's weird. Hey, Lawrence. Hey, Flying Car. Hey, Mateusz. Good evening. It's good to see you all. I have very, very scarce show notes, but there is still a lot that I can share. There's a lot to chat about. Among other things, I'm gonna give you my impressions of one of the most successful Marvel movies so far, which is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which I got to see. And we'll talk also about the Apple event last week. Yeah, that's only a few days ago. It's crazy how much happens in a short time. So I'll give you my my impressions on what Apple has launched. We'll also talk about a whole bunch of books that I read, and I will tell you more about the patron saint of cats. Hey, Cliff, good to see you. So plenty of stuff. Then after that, I'll record my Patreon only show, in which I will talk a little bit about my my current health and also my the steps that I took to become healthy. And I'm currently in a pretty good shape. I'm a better athlete than I've been in a long time. So that's very cool. Also talk a little bit about some sleep adventures that I had over the weekend. I'll talk about Italian food in the kitchen segment. We'll talk about multitasking and why that's a myth. I read a very interesting book, and maybe I'll talk something about a little bit about the length of sermons, of homilies. It's something that Pope Francis is hammering on about. So I'll give you my take on that as well. And of course, I need to give you my first impressions of the new expansion for Valheim, which is a great Viking game. But that's all for the show Father Roderick to the Max, which I record every week for my patrons. Hey Joachim, hey Sandy. Hey Evo, good to see you. So far, so good. The internet is still working. Oh my gosh. It is T-minus 7 days. Is that true? September has how many days? I never know. July has 31. August, September, it's 31. Okay, so T-minus 9 days, and then I'll move to my new home. And I'll have internet that won't break. Hopefully, of course, hopefully. But I'm so looking forward to moving. Anyway, that's what I'm going to talk about also at the beginning of the show. So I'll just check my audio settings here on the Rodecaster. That seems okay. So I'm also using the Rodecaster to record my voiceovers for TV, that they always want to have a flat profile. So normally when I'm podcasting, and the voice you hear right now has been enhanced a little bit, so there are some filters on it and some digital enhancements to make it extra clear or crisp. But for TV, I always have to turn them off because they do that in post-production. And they don't like it when the audio is too pronounced for TV. Apparently, that's not well. There are different requirements for sound coming out of TV speakers compared to the audio that is required for podcasting. Hey, Angelina, good to see you. Oh, September has 30 days, so it is T-7. Oh, wow. Did they teach you that in school to know how many days a month had? You had to use your knuckles like that. So January, 31. And then February, there's an incline, so it's only 28. March, April, May, June, July. Oh, that's where I was wrong. July. And then August, September 30, October 31, November 30, December 31. Anyway, but on October the 1st, I am going to move, come what may. Guten Abend, Seelenwiese. Herzlich willkommen. I am having a good time on the Millennium Falcon, yes. All right, shall we start the show? Is that okay with you? Any further questions, comments before I start? For those of you that are posting your comments on Facebook, know that I am not actively monitoring the Facebook window because of lack of screen real estate. But if you come over to my channel at Father Roderick on YouTube, you could also continue the chat there. All right. Well, let's get going. Do I have the jingles in place? I think so. Yeah. All right. Here we go. Enjoy. Hey there, welcome to another episode of my weekly show. I'm Father Roderick, podcasting on a quiet evening. I just prepared a nice Italian pasta, and now I'm a little bit drowsy, but I'll try to stay awake for the next hour or so to bring you my weekly show. As always, this episode is brought to you thanks to my patrons over at patreon.com/Father Roderick. If you choose to join them, you will get another podcast every week that I record specifically for my patrons as a thank you. It's called Father Roderick to the Max, and I've got a lot of cool topics to talk about this week. I'm going to talk about Italian food, give some recipes. I'm going to talk about the myth of multitasking. I read an interesting book about that. I'll also expand a little bit on my adventures at Elfia, which is a fantasy fair that I went to this weekend, and I had a sleep mishap happening, and so I'll tell you all about that in Father Roderick to the Max and much, much more. But that's for my patrons. For you, whether you're a patron or not, I am going to talk about a ton of things in this episode. Amongst other things, a potential cure for long COVID that has been discovered in Germany. Very exciting news. I will give you a summary of the books that I read this week. I read 5 books in 7 days. I'm so proud of myself. I shouldn't say that, but I am. I'll talk about the patron saint of cats, which I discovered today. And I'll tell you why this female saint has become the patron saint of cats. It's an interesting story. And I'll give you my first impressions after having seen the movie Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which is currently the box office #1 in the United States. That is because you guys don't have June. Or Dune, or however you want to pronounce it. But we have June, and June is #1 over here, and rightfully so, because it's a fantastic movie. But Shang-Chi is also extremely entertaining. So I'll give you my thoughts on that. And of course, we need to talk Apple, because Apple presented a whole slew of new devices, new software. I just finished installing iOS 15 on my iPad, so I'll talk a little bit about my impressions there. And possibilities for my own business and the things that I do, because there's one element of especially of the new iPads that I think could be extremely useful. We'll talk about that later, but first of all, let's talk about the news.
Do you know what's going on? This is what's happening in your world.
Face it, Catholics rule. We got Boston, South America, the good part of Ireland, and we're making serious inroads in Mozambique, baby.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
While I'm starting the show, there are also a number of people that are entering the chat room because I'm streaming this live. I always try to do that despite the fact that the internet here is a bit unreliable, so I never know how long the stream is going to last. But I just want to mention some of the friends in the chat room just to introduce you to them because you, of course, may be listening to this days after the fact. But we've got a 17-year-old boy from Belgium who is tuning in. He says, "You are making me feel very relaxed, and I love that you are a Star Wars fan too." That is awesome. We've got Mike Kuipers who is there. Good evening or good afternoon, Mike. And we've got Flying Car, Joachim, Angeline from the Netherlands, a fellow fantasy lover who I met this past weekend. And we've got Raiko, Ivo is there, Joachim, Cliff is there, Lionel, Mateusz, and many more. I apologize in advance if I didn't call your name. But it is just to let you know how happy I am that I'm doing this with the community. There's always this occasion to meet each other and to chat about the cool things that we love. One of the things that I did recently was to go to this fantasy fair, Elfia. It's actually called the Kingdom of Elfia, so they present it as if it is a country that you enter. There's even a guard and a frontier. And so when you arrive, this is, of course, also an occasion for most of the people to make beautiful costumes. When you arrive, there is this line, literally, on the pavement. This usually takes place on the premises of a castle. So in this case, it was in the south of the Netherlands. In Arsen, there is a castle with incredible gardens. That is what makes it so special. And we had a wonderful, wonderful weekend weather-wise. The sun was shining. It was 22 degrees Celsius. So you arrive at that border, and there is even a sign that says you're entering the kingdom of Elfia, or the gate to fantasy, or something like that. And you have to jump over it. So it's literally jumping into another reality, which for me is the whole fun of a weekend like that. So I took the weekend off here. So I was not assisting in the parish. I was staying with a family who runs a bed and breakfast. They have a chapel, so I celebrated Mass with them on Sunday. And so it means that that was literally like 3 kilometers away from the castle. So I could go there the entire day, and it was so much fun. And what made it extra special is that this is the first fantasy fair since a year. All the other events had been canceled because of COVID, but just recently the situation has improved so much in the Netherlands that we no longer have to keep that physical distance of 1.5 meters. Plus, there are other restrictions that have been lifted. And this is mostly an open air event. So despite the fact that they limited the amount of tickets, there were still thousands of fellow fantasy fans in all sorts of costumes. Even Star Wars, there were a lot of stormtroopers. And it was really great because I hadn't seen my friends of the 501st for even longer. Last year, I was also at Elfia, but there were hardly any Star Wars people or people in Star Wars costumes. But this year, there were people there, and I was like so happy to be able to talk Star Wars, even though I could have done an entire just only Star Wars weekend, because there's so much cool stuff happening in the world of Star Wars, so much to look forward to. And just reconnecting with people that I hadn't seen for a year. I mean, I realized even though I am an introvert, it's these weekends that I really recharge my social batteries. And what I also like about this situation is that, everybody is there for the same purpose, We're all there to enjoy kind of the stories that we tell with these costumes, the various franchises that are celebrated, because you've got just such a wide variety. There you've got people dressing up like Marvel characters or Disney. There are tons of princesses walking around there. You've got fearsome warriors. You've got anime. And it's always fun to start a conversation with people on how they made the costume, because all that is just homemade. There's always good food as well. So you have stands where they prepare food, and it's usually this fantasy fair food, which is very different from what you would eat at home. So you've got, like, one of my favorites is garlic bread, where they make fresh bread. So they bake it there, and then they add garlic sauce and some tomato sauce and some onions. And then there are lots and lots of plates with all sorts of ingredients that you can add to it. It's vegetarian, there's no meat, but it's just the fun of making your own garlic sandwich, and it's so good. So that's a staple. Unfortunately, there were quite a few of the barbecue stands that were unable to come. Most of them come from Germany, and I think that the restrictions are still in place in Germany. So a lot of those stands or those entrepreneurs couldn't come over. But nevertheless, had a wonderful day. There's also music. It's this year the music wasn't that good, unfortunately. There were some smaller groups that were okay, but on the main stage it was usually the kind of, I don't know. It was just loud and not the kind of music that I associate with fantasy. There is another fantasy fair a little bit earlier in the year. It's called Castle Fest. Also takes place at a huge castle near the park where they have all the tulips. You may have heard of that one place in the Netherlands where everybody goes to see beautiful tulips. Well, close to that, or actually on the premises of that park, there's also a castle, and that is my favorite music festival, because they have a lot of like Irish groups and folk music, and it's bagpipes and that sort of stuff, and that is what I associate with the world of fantasy, which is kind of my own limited frame. But anyway, I had a great time. I was very exhausted afterwards. But wow, that really was what the doctor ordered. And I'm so happy to look forward to, hopefully next year, all the regular festivals. That is, of course, if the situation stays as good as it is. Also, good news, I am about to move. It is finally there after almost half a year. It will be exactly half a year when I move. On the 1st of October, on the feast of St. Therese of Lisieux, I'm going to move into the rectory. The past few weeks, I've been working hard to make sure that everything that needed to be done gets done. And it was a lot of negotiation, because of everything that has to be fixed also costs money. And of course, I'm just renting the place, but I'm also investing in the place from my own money, because I want to stay there for, a number of years. But then it's always, what is the parish going to pay? What can they afford? What is Tridio going to pay? Because of course I'm also working there. Okay, we're a work from home organization now. So this is not just my home, but it's also my office, and it's my studio and everything. Like the kitchen was designed so I could stream from the kitchen. I could film videos from the kitchen. So all that, of course, is so much work. There's the electricity that had to be redone completely. I've been negotiating with a company and with the parish when it comes to the radiators. So 7 radiators had to be replaced, and it was expensive. And so we were trying to find cheaper alternatives. Turns out, after a second opinion, that the original offer wasn't that bad. And so I finally was able to give them the green light. But now those radiators still have to be ordered. So I don't know when they're going to install them. It may very well be that I'm going to be very cold in the next month. However, I've been living here in the attic of Father Henry's rectory for half a year now. And the first 3 or 4 months, I've been so cold, because there is one tiny radiator in this room, and it doesn't work because it's linked to the not to the rest of the house, but strangely enough, it is connected to the thermometer in the parish hall, so where they have their meetings. So it's only heating when people have meetings there, which is almost never, especially not during COVID. So there have been weeks that the maximum temperature here would be like 14 degrees Celsius. And I would sit here at my desk with my coat on and 3 pullovers, and I was still shivering. And I remember mostly my hands. They were so cold, and then when you have cold hands and you have to edit, it becomes very painful. It's just like everything is I don't know. It was not fun. But I told myself I am going to move no matter what. If the radiators come in November, tant pis, as they say in France, I will just make a fire in the backyard and sit there. We'll just go Viking for a month. But I am so ready to move, and I'm super excited. Today and tomorrow, and then on Monday, they're going to finish the floors, which is super cool because I already have the laminate in the living room, which looks very, very nice. But they're going to put some PVC tiles in the hallway and in the kitchen, so it will look like stone, but it is in fact plastic, but it's high quality. So it's easy to clean, but they had to, it's completely going to cover the very ugly tiles that were there. This house was built in the 50s, and well, in the 50s, the Netherlands was still recovering from Second World War, and it was just economically not a very good time to build houses. So a lot of the house, that's why this renovation was so costly. Everything has been done on the cheap back then, and now we're kind of upgrading it to normal standards. But it is looking so much better. Then they're going to put carpet on the staircase and also on the upper floor. I'm really, really, really liking that because in my previous rectory, I had laminate all over the place. And the downside, what I like about laminate is it looks pretty, and it's somewhat easier to clean than carpet. The downside is it's very, very echoey. And I noticed that when I was recording my shows, my podcasts, my live streams, there would always be this echo. Whereas now with the carpet, I'm going to be back to the situation that I had in my first rectory. When I first moved to Amersfoort, I had carpet on the entire upper floor. And there were rooms, and people that have visited me remember that. You would go from the hallway into a room, and all of a sudden it would be almost completely dead echo-wise, which is perfect if you do a lot of audio work. So I'm really looking forward to experiencing the house with the carpet in place, because I think it will also give more warmth to the entire house. It was all like kind of very old-fashioned. I don't know, it's like a flat floor upstairs. It wasn't very warm. But anyway, and then there is also another thing that I'm looking forward to, and that is I'll have my main workspace, or my studio will have just one desk. That is where I will do all my streaming. I will also have a green screen like I have here, and I will have the rest of the room for VR. So I deliberately did not plan any other furniture in that room. So it's going to be this big rectangular room where I can walk around. And for the next foreseeable years, that is where I will try out all my VR gear. And I am so happy to have a regular rectangular room, because I remember playing with the Oculus Quest at the old rectory, but that every room was uneven. And there would be cupboards and there would be furniture. So in VR, in order to prevent you from bumping into furniture, you have to trace a safe space on the floor. Like, you do that literally with a pointer, and you trace a line on the floor, and you tell the software, this is where it's safe to walk. And the moment you get closer to a wall or a door or a TV or a chair, the VR world will disappear and the real world will appear in black and white. So you know that you're going to bump into something. And that I always found that extremely restrictive, because the total amount of space was very, very small, the safe space where I could walk around. Whereas VR just needs this immersion. I was playing this Star Wars game, which is fantastic, where you get to face Darth Vader, and you're walking around in a I think on a Star Destroyer or something like that, and then every time the real life would interfere and I would get too close to a wall, and you have to fight Darth Vader with a lightsaber, and I was just afraid to let go of my fear and trust my feelings, because I was afraid that I was going to hit my TV with the controller. That is how small everything was. Now in my new house, that will be a lot better. So, but most of all, I'm so happy that I'll finally have my own home, my place where I can receive friends. It's got a nice big living room. I never had a living room where I could fit in more than 4 or 5 people at max. Now I have a living room. I can invite 10 people for dinner, and there will still be room. I will have I've designed in an IKEA planner a part of the living room where you can sit. I want to buy 2 couches. I never had I had a couch in my first rectory, but it was a very uncomfortable one. It was like a secondhand one that I bought from the thrift part of IKEA, and I was never happy with that couch. Now I'm going to buy 2 nice couches, and then I have the 2, I call them Harry Potter chairs because they look a bit old-fashioned, and you can even place 2 more chairs in a circle, so I can have 8 people, and then I'll be able to watch the next season of The Mandalorian with friends. I'm so looking forward to that. Oh my gosh. And oh my gosh, I can't stop talking about my new house and how much I'm excited about it. I will have another room that is specifically furnished for Lego, to create cosplay costumes, Star Wars costumes, Stormtrooper helmets, you name it. It's my hobby room, and it has a wired internet connection, so I can do streaming again. I can finally start my Lego streams again, which was so much fun, but I haven't been able to do that for more than 8 months. That's how long I've been in this hell of moving. Soon things will get better. I'm excited about it. And one more thing, as I told you last week, I am now very close to a great movie theater, and I watched another movie, and I'm going to talk about it right now.
How do you not like movies?
They're predictable. Like, the guy gets the girl, and that kid sees dead people, and Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Not liking movies is like not liking puppies.
They're fine. I just get bored and never make it to the end.
You need a movie education. You need a movication. I'm gonna give it to you.
So, I finally got to see Shang-Chi. I'm probably mispronouncing that because they make a point of pronouncing that correctly in the movie itself, and The Legend of the Ten Rings. This was a movie that I'd been looking forward to because, first of all, I'm a Marvel fan. Secondly, because everybody said, this is unlike any other Marvel movie and it's really great. And thirdly, it is half Chinese. Almost all the actors involved are Chinese, and there is a lot of Mandarin that has been spoken in the movie, especially in the first part. Now, I'm a quarter Chinese. My mom is born in China, in Shanghai, and a couple of years ago, I went on a journey with her to find her roots in China. And so I've been immersed for more than 2 weeks in this Chinese culture, and which is kind of part of my own heritage. And so I was really curious to see how they would implement these Chinese elements in the Marvel universe. Now, for me, the best part of the movie was the first fight. You see this, the father of Shang-Chi, that's what we discover afterwards, and he possesses the 10 rings, and he's been, living forever almost. Well, actually, I think the rings give him almost eternal life, at least eternal life here on Earth, make him extremely powerful. But then he comes across a small village hidden in a forest. It's very mysterious. I loved how they visualize that. He has to cross like a bamboo forest, and only once a year there is actually a kind of a maze that forms, and you can reach the village if you go fast enough. And it's really tense chase through this forest to get to the village. And then before he can enter the village, he has to fight a young lady who also proves to be extremely powerful and is able to withstand the power of the 10 rings. And that is a first in his life. He falls in love and then gets a daughter and a son. And the son is called Shang-Chi, but the daughter also plays an important role in the movie. In fact, after having seen the movie, I thought that they should have put both names in the title, because the daughter is just as powerful as her brother, and her brother wouldn't have been able to be victorious without her. And how original would it have been to not have just one superhero, but to have a brother and sister? I really hope that in the sequel, which is coming because they announced it after the credits, she will have a more equal role, because I felt that these two belong together. And in fact, the entire movie was about this family that is discovering how to fight evil with these ancient powers. Now, I'm not going to spoil the story for those of you that haven't seen it. It is the story is told very well, but what the movie stands out for is the choreography of the fight. So this first fight between the father of Shang-Chi and this lady is almost like a dance. They do a lot of wire work, like we've seen in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, that sort of stuff. But even more, I don't know, it's even better. You really, that they have used wires, but because they blend it with CGI, the entire thing becomes so visually stunning. And that was the case for a number of these fights, where it's almost like watching ballet. But it's not ballet because they're fighting. But it is really, really beautifully done. And I was very sad that the mother of Shang-Chi we don't see much of her. And I felt that you could do an entire prequel with her, because she was, I think, one of the most charismatic characters in the movie. Shang-Chi himself is actually, I don't know, the least interesting guy in the entire movie. I hope I'm not offending anyone here, but I thought that he was rather bland and not really, I mean, he didn't stand out in any way. He wasn't particularly funny. He wasn't particularly powerful or smart. Maybe that's his appeal, that he's kind of an everyman. But I felt that was a little bit strange, that his name is in the title, and yet maybe it's like Tintin or Frodo. You know, the main heroes or the hero archetypes are almost never really interesting because they're just the hero. The villains are more interesting, or the gray characters. Now, the father of Shang-Chi is played by an old famous Hong Kong actor, and he was amazing. This guy has such a gravitas, and I was happy that he was in the entire movie, because he definitely carried the movie. I thought his acting performance was way better than that of Shang-Chi. But all in all, it was really entertaining. It still is an American movie. It's definitely not a Chinese movie. But I think it will do well in China, because it is actually, well, as I said, most of the movie is spoken in Mandarin, and it's just subtitled, something they barely do in the United States. Here we're very much used to subtitles. But it gives it an extra flavor and makes it... Parts of the story did remind me quite a bit of the story of Wakanda, Black Panther. And maybe the success of this movie, especially in the United States, is also another proof that we are ready for these kind of movies. We don't just want to see, the stereotypical white heroes, classic superheroes. the world is diverse in which we live, so the superhero world should reflect that. And to have all these cultural elements that are kind of exotic, but also carry some story weight, like especially towards the end. You've got some, I'm not going to spoil it, but whoa, there is this super spectacular end fight, which is even, it's too much. It's so over the top that all of a sudden it's almost like genre breaking. I felt like I was watching, I don't know, King Kong versus Godzilla, but with different monsters. But it was so spectacular. But I really liked that they took the design of that entire end sequence straight from Chinese culture and Chinese depictions. So that was exciting. But it's still told from an American perspective. So the hero has been brought up in the United States. His girlfriend is Chinese originally, but I don't think she even knows how to speak Chinese. So she's second generation Chinese and very American, and at times, at least to me, a little bit irritating. I didn't care that much for her character. But I guess that is a reflection of the situation in the United States, where you have all these, older Chinese that still have, the culture, their Chinese culture and Chinese language background is very important to them. And then you have that second generation or even third generation that knows, like me, I'm like a second generation Chinese. Like for those of you that don't know, so my mom is half Chinese. So her mother was Chinese and her father was Dutch. So I'm like basically a quarter Chinese. But since my mom was born in China and spoke Chinese as a child, I kind of officially am like second generation Chinese, even though I've only been there once and I don't speak a word of Chinese. And although I do appreciate the food, I have to say that. But this movie motivated me even more to go kind of maybe teach myself a little bit more Chinese. I know that my grandfather was very good at speaking Chinese. He was able to speak, he spoke Mandarin and also some local dialects, but he did it almost flawlessly from what I've heard. So people could not tell that he was foreign. And so maybe that's where I got kind of this knack for languages, because that's something that I definitely, what I always try to do is not just approach a language from the grammar side of things or the vocabulary, but I want it to sound like the real language. So for me, the melody is important, the intonation, the accent. And Chinese is hard because there is no language that I know that comes anywhere close. And what it also makes it hard is that Chinese, it depends also on a melody. The way in which you use inflections in your phrasing or determines the meaning of what you say. And they even joke around with that. So for people that have a little bit of a Chinese background, it's very funny to see how the movie kind of acknowledges that. And it probably goes over the head of a lot of other viewers. So I was really entertained. I saw the movie, by the way, in 2D because I only have a subscription to my local theater for 2D movies. If I want to see a 3D movie like I did with June, I have to pay extra. Now it's just $150 extra, so I still may do that from time to time. But all in all, I pay, I think $20, I think, per month. So if I see more than 2 movies each month, and I'm definitely planning on doing so, then I'll already have made my money back. But after seeing Dune, now this is a huge success. And that's why I was very happy to see that there's a sequel coming. The 10 Rings will return. By the way, as always, stick around during the credits and after the credits for the extras. But there's one other thing that I really liked, and that is they tie this movie back to a very controversial element of the second Iron Man movie. Remember the Mandarin? And how so many fans were disappointed that they took the name of this very famous Marvel villain and basically turned it into a joke. Well, they use that as a as part of the narrative here, and I thought it was very smart what they did, and that was also a very cool moment where from time to time this movie does reconnect with all the other movies that came before it. It doesn't need it. I would have been totally happy if this was completely disconnected from the rest of the MCU, but they try to weave it in anyway. So that was about it. So, yeah, because I'd already seen Dune, and Dune was such a mind-blowing experience. It was unlike any other movie that I've seen in a long, long time. I was kind of secretly expecting this movie to give me that same excitement, and then at the end it was like, oh, it was fun, but it's, I'd say it's just a Marvel movie. That sounds very spoiled because the Marvel movies are really, really well crafted, but it wasn't as life-changing, I would say, as Dune. I would equal that to or equate that to seeing a Star Wars movie. It is so epic, and it's an amazing movie. I can't wait to see it again. Whereas Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is just a very good Marvel movie, but it's not super great. So I think that if Dune would have also premiered in the United States at the same time, I think that Dune would have been top box office, and maybe Shang-Chi would not have been as successful as it is. I don't know. Just we will never know because, of course, there is this slightly delayed release of Dune in the United States. I think it comes out around the 20th of October. That's going to be a long wait for those Dune fans, but trust me, it's going to be worth your while.
Catholics rock!
Here at the Peculiar Bunch, we're always happy to tell you everything you always wanted to know about Catholics, but you were afraid to ask.
Catholics can be a peculiar bunch. No meat on Friday.
Oh, meat? What do they eat? Light bulbs?
So in this episode of the Peculiar Bunch, I'm going to talk a little bit about the patron saints of cats.
Man, you guys got more crazy rules than Blockbuster Video.
But of course, this is also the place where you can ask questions, and sometimes people will ask those questions during the live chat. So Sebastian had a question for the Peculiar Bunch and writes, Father Roderick, I always thought about something, and it is whether the good Christians who are not Catholic are seen by God, or how they are seen by God. It really bothered me lately. So how does God regard Christians that are not Catholic? Well, it's very simple. God loves everyone, and he loves us because we are his children. In fact, God doesn't even love only Christians. He loves anyone. He loves even villains. He loves even sinners. He can't do anything else because God is love. What matters is therefore not how God sees us, but what truly matters is how do we see God? How is our relationship to God? The relationship with God to us is always good. Even when we sin, even if we do the most horrible things, God will still continue to love us, and he hopes that his love will win us over. But what I do in life, how I see God, that will determine in many ways my only relationship with God. Say, for instance, you've been brought up with a religion where people taught you to fear God because God is vengeful. God is constantly watching you like some super spy control system. God is going to put you in hell for when, even if you stray away for 1 second. If you are brought up with this kind of I hesitate to call it theology, but this vision of God, then that will determine your own attitude. If you are afraid of God, how can you open yourself up for his love? It's going to be a lot harder. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is harder. This is also true for how we see Jesus. Most Christians see Jesus as the Son of God, as our Savior, someone who gave his life, who was able to give us forgiveness, because he took on himself the cross that we deserved, and he kind of by giving his life, he gave the ultimate gift. There is no bigger separation between the Son and the Father, between Jesus and his Father, than him dying and feeling abandoned by his Father. We also feel abandonment in our lives, but that is always temporary, and it's on a human level. But the stronger the love, the harder and the most painful the separation. There is no greater love than the love between the Father and the Son. It's so great that it's called the Holy Spirit. It is a person. So the moment that the cross kind of destroys that, there is no boundary almost to the suffering. And so all our sins and suffering are kind of enclosed by that sacrifice of Jesus. That's how I see that. And so, but if you see Jesus just as an example from the past, or maybe a prophet, but on equal footing with so many other prophets, then that will also determine your own hope of salvation, your own way of looking at things. Now, between Christians and other religions, there are sometimes huge differences in how we look at God, how we perceive him in our stories, how we try to understand him and apply his commandments. And sometimes there are traces, I think, in almost any culture of God himself. That's the Catholic view is always God is communicating himself. And so even if there are imperfect ideas of God, there is still a nugget of truth in there. Even the worship of all these demigods and gods, like I don't know, Thor and his brothers and sisters. A Catholic would never say that's completely rubbish, that it's nonsense. We would always say, well, those are traces. There are traces of God. There is a certain intuition that there has to be a God, but it's just not revealed to them. God has not revealed to them yet who he truly is, and we believe that revelation happened through the Bible. So and through Jesus. The more you get to know the Bible, the more you get to know Jesus, the more you will understand who God really is. And so sometimes misconceptions can also impact our actions, because we believe that God wants something, like, for instance, I don't know what kind of God wants you to, I don't know, kill 5 chickens every day because otherwise you will not win the war. I'm just a random example. Then that is very different from I don't know, a vegetarian Christian who would say, well, I think that God loves all his creatures and he has given us just wonderful fruits and vegetables and we can live by just eating that. Why would I kill chickens? And why would I kill chickens to win a war? It doesn't make sense. Anyway, so your point of view, your philosophy, your view of God, your perception of God's revelation throughout history does determine your relationship with God. There, for instance, another example, sometimes religions will use faith as an excuse to go about killing other people that don't believe. And this has happened in all the major religions. There's always this temptation to make an absolute of your own faith, and to think that the only way to convince your neighbor is by threatening, by using force, by using violence. And that, of course, is the total opposite of what we see that Jesus does. When Jesus encounters non-believers, non-Jews, Samaritans, people that have a different, set of habits, different culture, he always approaches them with respect, listening them, and revealing himself to him. But never with force. He's never saying, you go on your knees now, and if you don't, I'm going to just kill you right here and now. That's unthinkable. And since Christians are called to imitate Jesus in their lives, we should also always have this respectful and engaging and inviting attitude towards people that don't share our beliefs, and always go look for the light in their point of view. Always first try to find what's good, because the good always comes from God, no matter in which culture and which religion. There are traces of God everywhere. And then, of course, there is this further development and understanding of God, what God wants, and that can be a correction to certain aspects of religions or certain cultures. So when it comes to Christians, Catholics and other Christians, we believe in Jesus. We read the same Bible. We for in many respects we pray the same prayers. We even stem from the same forefathers. We have the same root. Only in history, people sometimes disagree. They fight and they part ways, and then their culture develops different from ours. But that doesn't mean that God stops loving us, or that he stops bringing people together and helping people to understand one another. So if God looks at my fellow Christian with love and patience and trying to help that person with the Holy Spirit to understand what he wants and who he is, why would I do any different? That would be my reply to that. You know what? I was going to talk about the patron saint of cats. I'm gonna do that next week. I'll just tell you who it is. It is a Belgian saint. She's called Saint Gertrude of Nivelles, and it's a fascinating saint. I think she lived in the 7th century, but how she becomes the patron saint of cats, that's a story for next week's show.
When did you become an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics?
Last night. The packet. The extraction theory papers. Am I the only one who did the reading?
All right. No, you're not the only one who did reading. I did a ton of reading. It has to do with the fact that I'm trying to catch up on my reading challenge. Now, I'm a huge fan of Goodreads, which is owned by Amazon, but it is a community. It was not created by Amazon. It's a community of people that love reading, write reviews, share tips on what to read. And for me, that has been a major source of inspiration for my own reading list. And as a child, I was a huge reader. And then for a long time, I barely ever read anything but the strict necessary. So most of the time because of study. And then later on as a priest, because I was just so insanely busy and I was always watching TV, almost as a pacifier. So I was so busy, my life was so out of whack in a certain way that I thought the only way to relax was to watch TV. And just a few years ago, I rediscovered reading as a huge source of relaxation, and also input, creative input, gives me ideas. I love to read fiction. I also love to read nonfiction and science books and whatnot. I'm reading everything at the same time, and my life has truly been hugely impacted by starting to read again. And then in order to motivate myself to read even more, I've been using the Goodreads challenge. I started that last year for the first time, and I vowed to read 25 books or something like that, which for me was a lot because I barely read 3 books a year. I made it. I did read a book every 2 weeks, I think. And then for this year, I told myself, hey, I'm going to read 1 book per week. And that should be possible because every day I reserve 1 hour for reading. So usually it's at the end of a work day, so from 5 to 6. So at 5, I say my evening prayer, and then I have about an hour before I go into the kitchen to cook, and I just read. But sometimes work takes a bit more time than I anticipated, but then I always have a second occasion to read, and that is when I'm doing my training runs for the Marathon of Rotterdam. And right now I'm in the phase where I'm doing these long runs. So a short run is 8 kilometers. Today I did 16 because I had to catch up a little bit because during the weekend I didn't do any running. And this Monday I ran 32 kilometers. So then I'm running for 3.5 hours. And, well, I can totally not listen to anything. I never listen to music when I'm running. I sometimes just like to have time to think. But often I will also just listen to audiobooks. And so this week, I finally started to catch up on my reading challenge. Because of when I set myself this challenge of reading one book a week, I had no idea that just a few months later, I would be kicked out of my house and I had to move to a different town and my life was going to be all upside down. So for a number of months, I barely had time to read. Now I'm like 25 books behind on my list, but I'm catching up. And so I have been reading 5 books this week. And let me just briefly tell you. Well, I'll tell you what I'm reading because I'm always reading a number of books simultaneously. I'm not always in a mood for nonfiction. Sometimes I just want to read Wheel of Time, and then I have to step away a little bit from the fantasy world, and I read science fiction. So I've got a number of books that I'm currently reading, and I'm going to mention those first. So what's still open on my reading list? I'm reading a book called Stiff Upper Lips, which is a funny Belgian book about British culture and especially the kind of the quirky nature of some of the habits of the Brits. It's very funny. Also reading The Extraordinary Adventures of Lupin, which is the book that inspired the TV series on Netflix, which was super good. I bought a book called To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. And I read some good reviews about it. I only started reading the first chapter, and then I was like, okay, this is too much like other books that I'm reading, so I'm getting confused. So I'm keeping that one on the shelf for now. I read an interesting Dutch book on minimalism. It was a short book, but what I liked is that it went way farther than just, this is how you minimize the amount of stuff that you have. It also applied the kind of the principles of minimalism to every aspect of life, also your job, your goals in life, and try to go to what is truly essential, and that will make you happy. Stuff cannot make you happy, but in a way, this book taught me that it's also not the amount of work that you do or the number of projects, and I've usually fallen in that trap many times before, where I thought that I just had to work to feel that I was doing what I was supposed to do. Well, this book opened my eyes and told me that's not the case. I'm still waiting for Ready Player 2. It will be on Storytel, which is kind of like an Audible kind of service. It's a flat fee subscription service they have so many books. But this book, Ready Player 2, is coming in October. So I'm definitely going to listen to that book right away. I'm reading right now The Grisha 2, which is the sequel to Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. Very entertaining young adult fiction. I started to read a book by Xijing Liu, a Chinese science fiction writer, called Ball Lightning. This is it's just one book. It's one story. It's about a guy whose parents are killed by ball lightning, and then he as a scientist later on, when he's old, he wants to know the secret of ball lightning, and that ultimately turns into a science fiction story. It's very well written, and it's just one book because I also want to read the trilogy that he wrote, like the Three Body Problem. But I had a hard time getting into that one because it's long and it's a bit complicated. I'm also reading a book by Gary John Bishop. It's called Do the Work. Gary John Bishop is kind of a Scottish life coach. He's very entertaining. He's very direct. It's basically, if you want to summarize it, his attitude is stop whining and just try to do what you need to do. And it's really a kick in the rear kind of book. And sometimes I like listening to that. I was like, yeah, I'm often falling in the trap of self-pity when things don't go my way. And this book helps me to quickly snap out of that, because it's not, self-pity is never helpful. I also found a book called Star Trek Picard, The Last Best Hope. So this is part of the novelizations based on the Picard series. Haven't started reading that one. Seeking the Lord of Middle-earth by Geoffrey Moreau. I haven't started reading that one. I am currently... Let me go to the books that I have finished already, because there's so many that I'm still in the process of reading. This is a book that I discovered on TikTok. I was like, TikTok, the algorithm just every once in a while shows me some what they call book talks, which is TikTok clips about books. And there was this lady who appeared in my timeline, and she said, oh, I have, for those of you that don't like reading, or you have friends that don't like reading, I have 5 books. I will guarantee you that they are page turners, and you will win them over if you tell them to read these books. So I wrote down the title, so I was curious. And one of those books was called In 5 Years, a novel by Rebecca Searle, I think. Yeah, Rebecca Searle. Apparently, the book did very well in American bookstores. It is the type of book that I would have never read had it not been for this TikTok series. Or this video that said it's a page turner. And boy, it was, and I really enjoyed it. The story is about this, actually they're 2 friends, girls, and it's very much a book written for women. That the entire perspective is from women. So sometimes I'm reading it and I'm thinking, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to read this as a man, because it's clearly not geared to me. But the story is so good that it transcends it. But it made me aware that there's definitely a certain genre that is geared towards women and maybe not towards old women, because of course you can't generalize that. And the same is true for man. Not all men are the same in taste or sensitivity. But anyway, this book tells the story of these 2 good friends, and one is the more flirtatious one who has a boyfriend after boyfriend. The other one is trying to control her life. She's very much into counting stuff, preparing. She's over-prepared. Has to do with some youth experiences. We discover that later on. But then at the very beginning of the book, when she has a fiancé, and well, I think he proposes to her. This is all happening in the first 2 chapters, I think. So I'm not spoiling that much. So he proposes to her, and then the night after the proposal, she wakes up in a different time, in a different place. She doesn't recognize the apartment. On the news, she sees that it is exactly 5 years later. But it feels so real, and she's not with her fiancé. She's with a totally different man, and she's clearly very much attached to that man, and like, but it's so real that she feels like this is not just a dream. This is a prophecy. This is going to happen unless I do something about it. And then the rest of the book tells you her story, and it is the climax of the book is just like so good, because of course the entire time you're wondering, like, is this future that she saw in that dream, is that going to happen? And is it inevitable or not? Can she change it? But what's much more important is, what does it mean, what she saw? What does it mean? What's the true meaning? And the true meaning has nothing. This is not a science fiction book. This is, I thought it was going to be like a time travel book or something like that. It's none of that. It is a very human book. It is just all about love, about sacrifice, about, well, I can't say what it's all about because I would spoil certain plot points, but it was a page turner. I read this book in one day, and even though, well, again, it was not geared towards me, it's also, well, some of the the life choices of the characters wouldn't be my life choices at all, but I still thought that there were some gems in this book and some insights in relationships, and yeah, it was moving. I loved it. I really loved it, and it was a book that I never thought I would ever read, let alone like. Another book that I finished reading is called The Myth of Multitasking. That was very interesting, but I will talk a bit more about that in both in the next episode of The Walk and also in Father Roderick to the Max. I read another book which wasn't that good. It's called Courage to be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga, two Japanese writers. The book is not at all Japanese. It kind of presents itself as Japanese wisdom, but it's not. It goes back to it's basically a conversation between a teacher and a pupil about the psychoanalytic teachings of Alfred Adler, who is a psychologist from the early times of psychology. So he's he used to be of the school of Freud, but then he kind of disagreed with much of what Freud said and developed his own theories on human behavior. There are some interesting aspects of it, and also some things that I think are completely outdated and don't feel right. Like when at one point he says, there is no trauma. That's one of his divergent ideas when vis-a-vis Freud. So Freud says, all these traumas are determining our life, and Adler says that's too deterministic. In fact, I would say trauma does not exist. It is a pretext so we use certain events that happen to us as a pretext to not do certain things. And the moment you set yourself goals, so he calls that teleology. Telos in Greek means end. If you set yourself different goals, you will also start to change your behavior, and you'll be able to step over those traumas. Now, I don't think it's as simple as that, but I did recognize a number of these patterns of thought in other books as well. If you look at some of the self-help stuff, even Tony Robbins sometimes has this Adlerian approach where he says it's just in your mind, just reframe it and right now, and attach some strong emotions to it, and you'll be fine. And reframing is a powerful tool, but I don't think it always works, because sometimes the scar tissue is too big. What people had to go through requires a much less simplistic approach. It does work from time to time. It definitely has helped me to learn how to reframe certain things and to look at my own behavior, as it were, from a distance, instead of just submitting myself to my rage or my frustrations and whatnot. But it was interesting while reading this book, I realized how much of this goes back to Alfred Adler and his theories. I would love to hear some, professional psychologists and what they think of Adler. I also finished reading a book by a Dutch author, Adrian van Dis, who talks about a journey he made through China. This is written 30 years ago. I did not like it at all. I mean, he's got a very vivid way of describing his journey, but he looks down on so many people that he sees, and he has no comprehension for the culture that he's in. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this is one of the books that they would always say it's such a required reading and such a great author. And it's like, I misrespect in the way he writes. And then I read a book by a French author called Stéphane Garnier, Do and Think as a Cat. And it was kind of silly. If you want to read why, I posted a short review on my Goodreads account. I'm Father Roderick on Goodreads, in case you're wondering.
The scientifically wonderful world of science.
What sort of science?
Welcome back, science friends.
So I just wanted to briefly mention that, of course, also scientific research into COVID, into the different variants of the virus that are making the rounds, and also all the scientists that are working on improving the vaccines and other treatment ways to treat patients of COVID. That is of course now being invested in all over the world. We've rarely seen such a flurry of scientific concentration and focus as in these times of COVID, because of course the threat is huge. Now, one of the things that was a big enigma in this entire pandemic was the effects of long COVID. I've been a sufferer of some of these effects, but many other people have been doing much, much worse. Even Father Henry, who has only had COVID for about a week, and he had very mild symptoms, has still not fully recovered his taste. That's scary, because, man, for him it was almost like a cold, but he lost taste for a couple of days, and he's still complaining that he can't taste wine as he used to taste. He can't taste the food. He has part of his taste back, but it's not the same anymore. I'm so happy that is not the case with me. I think I've fully recovered that on that level. But I've had other long-term problems due to long COVID, mostly fatigue. I'm super excited that I've finally been able to gain most of my old form back, and with the marathon training, I'm actually doing even better than ever before. I'm still losing weight. I now weigh 74 kilos. So I've literally lost, in 4 months, I've lost 10 kilos. No, in 3 months, I've lost 10 kilos. It's 20 pounds. And I'm still going down, and it's all because I'm paying much more attention to what I eat. I'm trying to eat even veggies in the morning, and so it's a lifestyle change. And I've always done counting of calories and working out, but I feel that I've gone a step beyond that. It's actually like a switch in how I eat and what I eat, and that is making all the difference. So that has been super beneficial when it comes to helping me get better or build up my overall form after long COVID. But I still have sometimes these days where I'm in bed most of the afternoon. It's crazy, and it's random. I still feel that these are kind of lingering remnants of long COVID. Now, for scientists and for doctors, it was very hard to treat long COVID patients. There are many different approaches to it. I think I've been very lucky with the kind of therapy that I've had, because I think they were really onto something. They said this is like a system shock, COVID. It's like having been in an accident. And so it's all about slowly building up, taking tons of rest, learning to pace yourself, and then slowly tell your body constantly like it's safe again. You don't have to stay alarmed. Well, that helped me. But in Germany, they've been treating long COVID patients, I think 3 patients. So this is far from, conclusive proof. They've been treating, I think, 3 or 4 patients with a drug that is normally used for heart patients, BC007. And what that does, it improves the blood flow, and apparently as a side effect also is stopping the microcirculation of harmful auto-antibodies. So apparently, according to these scientists, when you contract COVID-19, special auto-antibodies start to circulate in the bloodstream. And with certain people, and that's actually a huge percentage, I think like 40-50% of the people that have had COVID have a form of long COVID as well. These auto-antibodies also damage certain structures within the body, or they may also block circulation. That's why people sometimes get brain malfunction or vision problems, or maybe even taste. That's also probably part of the system in your brain that connects sensations or connects your taste buds with the interpretation. That kind of gets out of whack. And apparently, as soon as these patients started to take this drug, their symptoms started to diminish, especially the brain fog that a lot of long COVID patients are complaining about. Started to dissipate immediately, and it's as if, someone was wiping the mirror clean. That is hopeful. It's the first time that I think that we've seen a drug that actually has a measurable effect on long COVID patients. Let's hope that they can use that as a basis for further research.
We are on the cutting edge of technology.
Wow. Well, what does that mean?
Just plug it in. It's going to say, hey, I see you plugged in a new device. And it's going to load in the appropriate drivers. You'll notice that this scanner build... Whoa.
Well, all your technology stuff, it just ends in disaster.
But there is one more thing.
All right, and that one more thing is, of course, the Apple event that happened last week, during which they presented a number of new devices, or should I say slightly upgraded devices, because this was a very, very small improvement for most of their stuff. The iPhone 13 came out in 4 flavors. So you've got the mini, you've got the regular ones, you've got the Pro and the Pro Max. The casing is exactly the same, slightly faster processors, not that impressive. One huge improvement is the camera setup, especially of the Pro iPhone 13s. They've got much bigger cameras. The whole thing becomes a little bit unbalanced almost. That's what most of the reviewers complain about. It's like the iPhone gets top heavy. I think it's the trade-off for having good cameras. But what they've been able to do with software optimization, or not optimization, but software refinement is even more impressive, because they're using the LiDAR depth scanner that is built in, plus all the other information that they gather from the photos that they take, to create artificial blur. That is, when you use regular cameras, it's the depth of field. So when you have big lenses that let in a lot of light, you can make a shallow depth of field, which means that only something that is exactly in one place can be very sharp and all the rest is blurry, which creates depth without reverting to 3D. You see that a lot. In fact, for those of you that are watching me right now on YouTube, you can see that I applied that by blurring the background a little bit. If you use green screen, so I'm currently pretending that I'm sitting in the Millennium Falcon near the chessboard, and that is a slide that I projected onto a green screen. But I noticed when I first started to use these Star Wars backgrounds that they were super sharp, and it just felt fake. It didn't feel real. And so the trick was to just blur it in Photoshop. And now the background is slightly blurred, and so it gives much more a natural depth of field to the green screen that I'm using. So Apple they could already do that in a portrait mode, for instance, in photos, but now the processor is fast enough to do it during filming as well. It's still artificial, of course, because these lenses are tiny compared to a DSLR, but it's still impressive that they were able to pull that off. There's still a little bit of focus hunting I noticed in some of the examples that they gave. So I don't think I can use it for TV yet, but it's getting awfully close, and it's just very impressive what they've been able to do. So it's trickery. It's just software trickery, but still, wow. Then the thing that I was most excited about is not the Apple Watch, because that just has basically a slightly bigger screen, and I think in terms of performance, it is almost identical to the Apple Watch 6. But I'm not in the market for an Apple Watch anytime, because it only works with an Apple phone, and currently I'm using an Android phone. I'm super happy with it, and it's not at the end of its life cycle. So even though I love what Apple's doing with the cameras on the phone, right now I'm sticking with my Android phone. So no Apple Watch for me. But I was super excited about the iPad mini. And I was amazed to see that not only did they give it the small border that we see on the other iPads, and I'm a huge iPad fan. I'm still so happy that Cliff Ravenscraft managed to convince me that I had to go for the iPad and not for the Samsung Tablet 7 Plus or something that I was coveting at that time, because it's already outdated. You only get 2 updates software-wise, and then it's done. And a lot of the software is not optimized, whereas with the iPad, I've got the big iPad Pro. I use it in conjunction with Logitech keyboard, which is fantastic. I can't go back to just having an iPad without a keyboard. What I like most about the iPad mini is that they improved the camera, the front camera, which has always been Apple's Achilles heel. Now they gave it an ultra wide angle, pretty sensitive lens, and it can do center stage. Center stage is again is software where when you're on a FaceTime call, or it works with a number of other apps, the camera can follow you because it's such a wide angle. It just zooms in, and because it's higher resolution, the camera can move along with you. So if you walk around, the camera will, and it's just a software trick, will follow you. And if another person enters the scene, it will zoom out to show that other person as well. Now, my first thought was, this would be fantastic for Mass. As you know, I'm streaming Mass every week, and we've always been doing it. Well, at first we did that with multiple cameras and the switching system, and you always had to have a lot of hardware and always another person who was directing the cameras, and we had these swiveling cameras, but it was such a pain to set up. Then when I had to move, and we took everything with us, for months I've not been able to do that. And here recently I built a set in the attic, and it's just a 1 camera thing, and it's just a wide angle, and you see the camera itself doesn't move. Now there is a camera that you can use, costs about $400, I think, that will actually do what Apple is doing with Center Stage. It will kind of do like this software camera. The thing is, it is a very bad camera. It's not very sensitive to light, low resolutions, just HD, and then it does a cut from HD, so you get 720p or even worse. That is not enough for modern day streaming. The iPad can do HD in combination with this software zooming. The only thing is, and that is, well, there are two issues to solve. First of all, you need to be able to have good quality audio, and we know that Apple took out the headphone jack, so which is still so useful. I use it all the time on my phone. I just want it back anyway. But there are solutions for that. I can get the Rode. There was a set of Rode microphones that one has a USB-C connector. So I think, but it's unproven yet, you can use the receiver and connect it to the iPad, and then use the emitter with a microphone as a lavalier microphone. So that would solve the audio. The second thing is, I need to stream. And from what I've read, this Center Stage only works per app. You have to switch it on per app. And so the Zoom app works with it. Of course, FaceTime, but as a mixed platform user, I never use FaceTime, nor would it be good for streaming. And then I think it works with Filmic Pro, which is good because that's a professional filming app that is used a lot. But I don't see YouTube. I don't see Facebook. So what I fear is that YouTube and Facebook cannot use Center Stage, which would make it unusable for now. So I'm hoping that it will somehow be implemented by Facebook and YouTube, but I don't know. I don't think they're going to do it. With Facebook, I can't even go to my wide-angle camera in the streaming app, and YouTube disables the motion compensation on my phone when I try to use it. So these apps are made for so many different devices. I wonder if they'll make it compatible with Center Stage, but it is almost there, and I think I would be able to stream from anywhere in the world just carrying this tiny iPad with me. Oh, they gotta make it work. It is too convenient. Anyway, with that, I need to start wrapping things up. Sorry, this show took a little bit longer than I thought it would. 1 hour and 17 minutes. Wow. Hope you enjoyed it. For my patrons, there's going to be another show, Father Roderick to the Max. It will appear in your feed if you are subscribed. If you're not, go to patreon.com/Father Roderick and join the community. Talk to you later. Thanks for stopping by. That wraps it up, and you guys are still there. It means the internet is still working. How cool is that? I see that is already 22 minutes past 10, which means, oh, golly, it is 37 minutes past my bedtime. I gotta go to bed. Just going quickly through your comments here in the chat. Sorry that I didn't react to all your comments. Jeff says, Father Roderick going full Matrix. Yes, I love the Matrix. Franz is very happy for me. Probably about moving. Michael wants to know if I watched Hacksaw Ridge. No, I'm not familiar with that. Daniel is from Slovakia. June will be free on HBO Max. So the US box office hopes aren't great. But will it be on HBO Max right away? They should really. Even if you can watch it on HBO Max, I would tell any Dune fan, go see it in the theater. This is a movie that is made for a movie theater, for a big screen, IMAX. It's not going to be the same on a TV. Erica says, I wasn't the biggest fan of the Grisha trilogy, but I loved Nikolai's character. Reminded her a lot of Captain Jack Sparrow. Yeah, I heard the Crows, the books with the, what is it, the Crow something, are even better. I think it's entertaining. It's young adult. It's not very deep. At least the first book wasn't. But it's okay. I enjoy it. Yeah, Margot also disagrees with the that there is no such thing as trauma. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest issues that I have with the Adler approach. Chosen Night Wolf, first time checking out the podcast. Nice. It's good to see you, George. Welcome. Reframing can really help with trauma therapy in some cases, but it's a much more complicated process than just simply deciding to think about things differently. I wish it was that easy. Yeah, totally agree. And then the book is written in a kind of a condescending way, so the teacher is constantly like telling the pupil is constantly enraged by all the things that he proposes, and then he's like, but you don't understand, young Padawan. And it's like, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. Nadia, last day of radiotherapy. I'm so happy to read that. That's awesome. I hope you're going to feel so much better soon. Keep us up to date. That is wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is a wonderful conclusion to my day. The GeForce app on Windows can also follow people on camera. Yeah, but that's when I'm streaming, I don't have a PC. I use a camera with a USB cable to a laptop, to a MacBook Air. Don Diavolo saw June. Absolutely loved it. Really close to the book. Yes, it is, isn't it? It's wonderful. Arthur, good night to you too. Day and date on HBO Max for June in the US. Okay. Wow, that's stupid. I think that Marvel and Disney are already stepping back from that approach. I think it's not smart. But maybe they just don't want there to be a June sequel. I don't understand it. I think it's killing their own business. But hopefully the buzz worldwide will help convince Americans to go see it at the movie theater. Again, I can't stress how important it is to see this on a big screen. The movie, I don't think, would work on a small screen. Is Father Roderick reading comments for from somewhere else? No, I'm reading just YouTube. What degree are you, Father? A 3rd degree or 4th degree? Not sure what you mean by that. What kind of degree? Let's see, is there anything else? Oh, maybe I can go to Facebook and see if the people have written something there. Oh, I'm so excited. Today I discovered that the Orville is now on Disney Plus. I saw one episode of that, the first episode. I loved it. So much like classic Star Trek, and it's funny, and yeah. And they're gonna make a third season. I love it. Okay, what if I go to Facebook? Where did I post this? Oh, there it is. Okay, we've got 14 comments there. I can only see a few of them. Michel Ronveau wants to know what my weight will be. I'm aiming for 66. For my length, that would be the perfect weight. So it's right in the middle of my BMI. So I now weigh 74, which means I still have to lose 8 kilos. But I've already lost 10, so piece of cake. And for running, of course, it's super beneficial. 10, so piece of cake. Well, I had to click that to see the other comments on Facebook. No, the less I weigh, of course, the better it will be for my joints and the faster I can run. So that's another reason for me to lose the weight. Jim says, Father, you give me hope that the Catholic Church will pull through. Thank you for all you do. I'm not sure if I am much of an influence on the future of the church, but I think, yeah, she's going to be okay. Love the background in my studio. Yeah, it's the wonders of green screen. If I would lower the green screen, you'd see my running socks and my sweaty t-shirt on the floor. Okay, I'm going to wrap up. It really beat Suicide Squad up today. Oh, okay. I just watched the Matrix trilogy for the first time. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's lovely. Will you play the Star Wars KOTOR remake? Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I hope it's going to be graphically updated and not just a remake with the same graphical engine. Oh, Knights of Columbus. I'm not a member of the Knights of Columbus. Actually, that doesn't exist in Europe. It's an American thing. I wanted to ask you if you're going to play Sea of Thieves now that there's a free adventure of Pirates of the Caribbean. Oh, cool. Yeah, I need to go back to Sea of Thieves, but again, I'm waiting to move because my internet is not, it's just not reliable enough, and it's not very comfortable. I sit at this desk for the entire day doing my TV work, and then gaming is like, it's not comfortable. I'm spending way too much time in front of this screen, so I'm waiting with that. I have the Ultimate Pass for the Xbox, so I'll do a lot of gaming from the couch in the living room. The game City of Brass. Okay. Let's see. How do you feel about somebody joining the Mormon Church? Well, it depends. If it were Catholic, I would be sad, because I have a lot of issues with the doctrine of the Mormon Church. Not with the people. They are very friendly. But their theology is, for me as a Christian theologian, it's really hard to follow. And yeah. It's not a religion that I would recommend. Let's put it that way. It's not a Christian religion either. It has elements from Christianity, but it's absolutely not a Christian religion. The City of Brass. Is that a game? I only see a book here. Oh, okay. It's a first-person action adventure from BioShock developers. Okay, cool. Oh. I've never seen this before. Oh, looks interesting. Why have I not heard of this? It's from 2018. Looks quite all right. Okay, let me turn that off. Knights of Columbus has councils in Poland. Ah, okay. Yeah, possibly. All right. GB has to go see patients. All right. Have a good rest of your day. Difficult to beat. Oh, I don't like difficult games. I'm so bad at gaming. Hey, I'm gonna sign off. Thank you so much for stopping by. I gotta go to bed. See you soon. Take care. Thanks for watching. Animal Crossing, I've played it once last week. I just don't have the time right now. And again, it's Wi-Fi, so there's lousy Wi-Fi in this